Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And we are back. And this week, we are talking about happiness, which we have talked about before, but kind of in a different context.
Happiness. Oh.
Happiness is the key, right? So, go ahead.
Right. Well, happy parents are better parents, aren't they?
Yes, and we've done an episode on that.
Right.
So, if you need to hear about that, go watch it.
And
go listen to it.
Right. In fact, miserable people make the world a worse place, and happy people make the world a better place.
Right.
I didn't say that. That's from Dennis Prager. And, Dennis is, I don't want to steal stuff. I got to say where I
got to give credit where credit is due.
Got to give credit where credit is due, but
yes.
But that's wisdom.
Right.
Okay, and that's really what this is about. Because in family law, there is kind of a tension between being a good parent and being a smothering parent.
So you haven't told what the topic is yet,
Oh,
though.
I haven't?
No.
Well, I thought you said it.
No, I was just talking about
Okay.
happiness in general, and then you kind of
Right.
dived in.
Right. The question, the title of this is, are you relying on your children for your happiness?
Right. Right. And this becomes really difficult when you're going through divorce, I think, because you've for most people, you've lost your marriage or that intimate partner or whatever. And so the kids are kind of, the last pieces of family life, that you have left. And it's really hard not to just want to hold on with everything in you.
Right, yeah, you're trying to hang on to the shambles of your old life. That's
really,
sad.
It really is.
No, that's sad.
It really is. It's hard. This is one of those really hard life transitions.
Right. So what happens is that, from the guy's point of view, first of all, there's a lot of anxiety about separation because mom is kind of in most cases the caretaker.
Right.
And the guys have to know, well, what do I bring to the table? Now, I don't have the relationship that I want. And so the tendency is to want to smother them and to kind of helicopter over them all the time.
Well, and I think that's actually more common in moms because it's like, a lot of times, especially when they're little, dad goes to work and, we've got the kids and, we've been with the kids and we're with the kids 24/7 and, dad's kind of coming and going as he's working and doing whatever. And now all of a sudden you're telling mom she's got to,
Yeah, you're probably right.
give up these kids half the time. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
But I'm the one that's done everything for years. I mean, Thomas and I know that not every family is exactly that way. Sometimes dad's the primary caregiver. It varies family to family. But when we're talking about this, we're talking about the most common situation.
We're generalized.
Yeah, the most common situation that we see, is stay-at-home mom or mom that works part-time or mom that has sacrificed her career. I worked full-time, but over the years, I had various part-time jobs as they were growing up. I worked full-time by the time the divorce happened. But I had been the person that if they're sick, I go get them. If somebody's got to stay home, I stayed home. If somebody's got to figure out how they get to ball practice at 3 p.m. while I'm at work, that was me. I took care of all that. He went to work and back. That was our deal. And in the beginning, I was home.
That was your division of labor.
That was our division of labor, right? And so then when you go through a divorce and all that shifts, and then a lot of times for mom, I can remember my kids going and me being like, okay, this is the cleanest my house has ever been. What am I supposed to do with myself now? That kind of thing.
Well, I kind of think back to that one case that we had where you attempted to intervene on behalf of our client and do some mediation. But this lady was intensely enmeshed with her children. And if the children expressed any kind of sadness, which is typical around transitions, right, then she would freak out.
You're talking about our client was dad.
Our client was dad.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I'm trying to remember who you're talking about. And I'm thinking,
I don't want to
the
mention
only-
their name.
No, of course
Yeah.
not. But I just was trying to think back on cases. I'm thinking the only person I really
You know
really
who
remember
I'm talking about.
yes, really having this very severely. Yeah, and I was trying to help her and dad actually, because what would happen is she was so upset at those transitions, and I believe she really was. I don't think it was. I don't think it was really fake or anything like that.
No, I think it was
she.
fake.
I think she truly felt heartbroken at the idea of being away from her children.
Right.
But the problem with that was the children felt guilty about leaving her.
Right,
And that's
right.
the part that she couldn't see. And this wasn't, I don't think this was even a 50-50 situation. I think this was like a 70-30 or something like that. But the children felt so guilty that a lot of times they wouldn't go with dad because it's like, oh, we got to stay here and take care of mom.
Right. And in extreme situations, a parent that's relying on their children is going to lose in court. We have a term that comes up sometimes when we're talking about custody cases called parentification.
Right.
And it's an easy trap to fall into as a divorced person because
Yeah.
you are vulnerable and in some cases lonely.
Right.
And the tendency is to want to focus that energy on your children and on making sure that your children never have a sad moment or never have an ounce of pain.
Right. Or even just that they got your back.
Yeah.
You know, my boys were 15 and 11. I've talked about this. My sons are now 32 and almost 28 here in just a few days. My youngest son will be 28. And, you know, the one that's 32 now, he was 15 at the time of the divorce. And it was almost like, you know, his dad had an affair and, you know, things that were really painful for me. But obviously the child was 15. He knew, you know, I didn't have to tell him. He's the one that told me. He's the one that discovered it first.
Right.
And so this was somebody who I knew he has my back, right? Because he's my child, and he and I have always been very, very tight. And I'm very, very close with the younger one too. But at the time he was just so little, you know, that he was only 11, and I was trying to shield him from a lot of that. And, you know, we did a replay of an episode a few weeks ago of a Christmas episode we did 2 or 3 years ago with all 4 of our boys. And that's one of the things my younger son talks about is he said he felt very left out of the loop because he felt like, you know, we were treating him like he was a kid and his brother knew things that he didn't know and all that kind of stuff. But this sort of becomes your tribe, right? I mean, me and my boys, it kind of became like, you know, the 3 musketeers, so to speak.
Right. And that's, you know, all things being equal, that's not good.
Right.
That's not good because the children need a relationship with their father.
They do.
And when you create those kind of loyalties, it hurts, it harms the relationship that they have with the non-custodial parent.
Yeah, and it did hurt my relationship with my older one and his dad in a lot of ways. And it also hurt his own, like, development and self-identity, and a lot of mistakes I made looking back. I can see like that was not a good thing to do, but at the time you're so emotionally distraught that you don't have any concept of what life's going to be like when your child's, you know, 22, 27, 30. You know, you're not really thinking about that. You know, you're in that moment. You've got, you know, these children, and they're pretty much, like you said, the remnants of your old life, and sometimes all you got left.
Right. And it's funny because, you know, on a different point, slightly, I guess, that I remember when the kids were little and everything was happy, that I pictured them going down the aisle and giving the valedictorian speech at their high school and getting straight A's, and I had this fantasy. And what I have learned is that it's tough to deal sometimes with the disappointment.
Because they're their own person.
Yeah.
And maybe being valedictorian isn't this huge goal for them.
Yeah, but they're at the age right now, my boys are at the age, they're both 18 and 19 right now. And they're at the stage where they're making some life mistakes.
Right.
And
as my kids were doing about 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I thought that Tammy had lousy kids. I
Right.
didn't realize.
You didn't realize all teenagers are lousy to an extent, right?
Right. But here's the thing: if my happiness depended on their success, I'd be screwed.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's really important for our clients. It's really important that you have a life outside of your parent-child relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and I personally think the trap is harder when they're older. I mean, I only have my own frame of reference, obviously, but I was present for yours.
Mhm.
And really at 1 and 2, they're so in need of such high level of caretaking
Right.
that really in some ways you can't be dependent on them in certain ways. I mean, I know you still get like emotional goodies from that. I
Yeah.
understand that. But you really, this isn't a child you can sit and talk to. Or it was really hard with my 15-year-old because, it'd be like, oh, dad just texted and he's not showing up. And you just want to go, oh yeah, here we go again. Sounds just like him. Blah, blah, blah. It's a little more challenging because you have to draw that line and treat them as a child, even though they're older and know what's going on, because that's what's good for them. And when they're babies or a little younger, like, my younger son was 11, I couldn't really sit and have that kind of conversation with him. So that's why he didn't have the impact of some of those
Right.
those things.
But
like
in
the
a way,
older one did.
it was good. It was good for the younger one.
Yes.
Because
His relationship with his dad struggled less over the years, I think.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And is more secure.
Yeah.
Whereas the older child has a lot of resentment that comes from
Yeah.
that alliance.
Yeah. And a lot of that dynamic still plays out between him and his dad,
Right.
at certain times. So, I mean, they both have a good relationship with their dad now. But definitely I can see how my part in it didn't help things. And again, you might not be worried about helping things from your ex's perspective. I was never worried about that. But I do want my kids to be, secure and to have good relationships. And I see the pain now sometimes that type of interaction brings my son now, and he's 32.
Yeah.
He's 32. You're not thinking about when he's 32 right now, but he's 32 and he's got a child of his own. And when he has difficult interaction with his dad, it brings him pain a lot of the times. And he feels caught sometimes between his own family
Right.
and his relationship with his dad. And it's just, it's, I mean, I think that there are a lot of things that I could have done differently in the beginning that would have helped that. I mean, my child's still who he is.
He's doing really great.
He is. And him and his dad have a good relationship. I don't mean to make it sound like it's bad, but, my child is who he is. His father is who he is. I couldn't have changed those things,
Right.
but I just think that if I had done certain things early on, he wouldn't have developed that level of resentment, and certain struggles wouldn't be there.
He had certain disadvantages because in a way this has been our life.
Yeah, and
So-
he was the first one, and we knew nothing.
Yeah. No,
By the time we got down to the other ones, we started getting smarter.
yeah, but we lived this, and the advice we're giving you. I mean, these are things we've done that have helped the kids, and they're doing well.
Well, and to me, that's the whole point of the podcast is like, here's what we've done well.
Mhm.
Here's what we've seen other people do well. Here's what we've seen other people do poorly. And here's what we ourselves did poorly
Yeah.
and would change if we could.
Right.
If I could go back and change those early times, especially right after the separation, and handle them differently, I would.
Right. And I think from my perspective with my boys, I did, get a lot of my happiness from them.
Right.
When they were young, because they were so cute.
I know they are so cute
They're
when
so
they're little.
adorable, and
They would leave and you would get depressed.
right.
And we were on opposite streaks because they would leave and I would go, oh yes, we're going to get some time alone. This is so great. And a chance to catch up and, do dishes and laundry and get groceries and all the things that you don't get to do when you have little children, because his boys are 11 months apart. So 1 and 2, we had our hands pretty full. And so they would leave, and I would feel this sense of relief. I mean, I love
She'd
the
be
boys.
like jumping up and down, celebrating, and I'd be down in the dumps.
I love the boys, and I
Yeah.
would miss them too when they go to their moms, but not the same way that he would, obviously. And so he would get kind of down, and then the next Friday would be time for him to come back, and I'd be starting to stress out at the level of what was coming at me with having 4 boys in the house. And Thomas would be, walking around singing and whistling because they were getting ready to come back. So.
Right. But I think that having the alternating week parenting plan from the very beginning helped this, because in a way, we as parents, we're the authority figure. We're above them in a certain way. They're not our peers.
Right.
And even as teenagers, they're not our peers.
And I think that's part of the mistake I made.
And we have always insisted that my kids, to one degree or another, respect us.
Right.
I hold I say, don't talk to me that way.
Right.
Don't, you need to have respect.
Right.
By the position, and that's a biblical thing.
Right.
The Bible says, honor your parents, honor your mother and your father. And then they would go away, and I would have to do the things that make me happy. So one of them is I had a new mate. That's a good thing. It was a good thing.
I'm glad spending time with me was the first thing you came up with.
Yes.
I thought surfing was going to come out of your
mouth.
Because
otherwise you would have smacked me upside the head.
That's true.
And she's done that before on the podcast. It's like, ow. All right.
So you'd go surfing.
Yeah, I'd go surf.
I mean, now you go surfing with them, so you surf more on the weeks we have them. But when they were babies like that, obviously they're not going surfing with you, and so that's something you would go do when they were gone to their mothers. Right.
So, but the thing is, as parents, we have to be parents. We can't. We're not their friend in a certain sense.
Right.
And you have to strike a balance.
Right.
Because, as we've taught before, having relationships means spending that time.
Right.
And spending, teaching and reading and doing things together that are fun. And what that does is it builds the capital that you need when they act out and then you have to punish them.
Right.
So you have to strike a balance. And I find that with my boys, I think we struck a pretty good balance.
Yeah.
Most of the time. I mean, they're not Rhodes Scholars, either one of them. But I think that they're resilient kids in some way.
Right. Yeah, and I think that parenting plan, in a lot of ways, forced them and you guys, right, to be more independent. It wasn't only good for them and teaching them to deal with things in that way, but it was also good for you and her, to kind of learn not to rely on them because they would go away for a week.
Yeah, they'd be gone, and I would have to somehow eke out my sad life without them.
Well, it wasn't too sad. I was here.
Right. But, we have our church, we have our support system and our peers. I have some good male friends that I met through the church. And I think it's really important to have same-sex friends.
Right.
That you do things with. And then, sometimes it's good to spend time alone and reflect. And, I'm kind of an introvert, and I like to sit there with a book and read or meditate or
play your guitar.
Play my guitar or read I have a devotional book I just got that's really good. And these are things I do for me. And
right.
then, because a lot of the times when we're disciplining, when we're exercising our parental authority, we're pulling our punches because we're afraid the kids won't like us.
Right. Or they'll want to be with the other parent or something of that nature.
Right. And then you just don't want to go there.
Right. And the kids start to, one of the things with Thomas's kids where they were so young, they were like, they really learned to work it.
Mhm.
You know, they had
Yeah.
so long of doing this from the time that they were so young
Mhm.
that they really kind of learned how to like get the best parts of each household, and bring them together.
That's true. That's true. And also how to play us off against each other.
That's true too.
On occasions, because they do. They're evil that way.
They are evil.
They are evil, and you were too.
And so were my children, huh?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's important to strike that balance and to have uh, have authority over the children, and so I'm teaching them. I try to teach them right from wrong. When they're little, you got to teach them. It's not good to hit your brother, and you should eat your breakfast before you go to school, and maybe it's a good idea to take a shower. I'm not sure.
Brush your teeth.
Brush your teeth.
Especially with boys, that's a big thing.
Yeah, and you have to teach them too about their identity and who they are in the world.
Right.
Like in our we're Christian, and we had our kids in Christian preschool, and then they were in youth group in the church. We're trying to teach them that they are Christians.
Right.
And by extension, that they are Ferreras. So
Right.
they are kind of they belong to a group, to a family.
Right.
And that's part of normal identity development.
Right. Yeah, and that's something I think you did particularly well with your kids is kind of giving them that, we're Ferreras and Ferreras behave this way.
Yeah.
Kind of foundation, which I think is particularly helpful when they go through like those teenage years and you have all these issues that come up and, bad behaviors and things they shouldn't do and, occasional, calls from the police, or whatever happens because of all the little shenanigans.
Not my little urchin's never going to do that.
You can say, well, this is not how Ferreras behave.
Right.
And that becomes and by the same token, you say this is not how Christians behave.
Right.
This is not what we believe, this is not our value system that you're adhering to.
Right.
Yeah, and I hear you sometimes even now when they go out the door, you'll say, remember you're representing.
That's right. You represent.
Right.
I think that's an important thing to teach kids.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're too enmeshed and if you're too just, I have to be with my kids 24/7 or I'm completely unhappy, that puts a lot of burden on them.
Yeah. And they feel that, especially when they're going back and forth between the two homes.
Right.
I think it really puts a lot of burden on them. And, the problem is that too, as they get older, especially, I think that can build into resentment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it depends on the kid's personality, because you have some kids where if they feel like a parent is emotionally relying on them, they'll feel the need to take care of that parent.
Yeah.
But other children, if they feel the parent's trying to rely on them too much, they'll be like, forget this, I'm going to the other parent's house where I can be a kid.
Right. You want to be a kid. Yeah. That's an important point. Kids need to be kids.
Right.
They need to have a period of innocence where they're not exposed to excessive violence and sexual images and discussions, and they need to be protected from that so that they can have that period where they ride bikes and they run around and they scream and they splash in the mud puddles.
Right. Right. And that's important. And that's part of what the process of divorce or separation from their parent can take away from them, unless you very much try to protect it. And if you have a parent on the other side who's not protecting it, it's even more important that you do.
Right. Yes, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting because, it gets particularly difficult, I think, around that 10-year mark with kids because they start becoming pretty aware
Right. Yeah.
of what's going on, and they're not old enough to really form, good decisions, see both sides of it. But they're old enough to be aware of things. And,
Right.
It's interesting because we've had parents that'll say things like, well, it's a step family, and they'll say, oh, everybody's equal in the house. Like
Right.
nobody's any different. Everybody's
Right.
equal. I think this is something that your ex-wife did a lot too. Like she had 2 new kids with her, or 2 more children, I should say, with her second husband. And it's like they did this thing in the house where like everybody's equal. And we love you both, and we all, but the fact of the matter is that it's not equal. If you're like with me and you, our children are we both have stepchildren, we both have children. They just happen to be 2 boys each. And how we treated my children was not the same as how we treated your children. Partly because there was a huge age discrepancy, but partly because coming in, the value system my children had been raised under to that point with their dad was different than your value system.
There's a clash of family culture.
A little bit. I mean, some of it was the same, some of it was foundational, but some of it was different. And I think trying to pretend like those differences don't exist can put a lot of pressure on kids and make them not understand the dynamics of what's happening. And somehow we get in our brain that different's bad. Different's not bad.
Right.
Different is just different, and that's okay. Everybody is still loved. It's not a matter of that. And so I think that just different things like that of how we approach it when we think we're doing the right thing and we're trying to, keep everybody, happy and keep ourselves happy and not have all the children fighting and all this stuff can sometimes make your children feel pressured.
Right.
One
of the things that I've seen people do that it seems like it's loving, but it's not, is I miss you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna miss you.
Yeah.
And then calling midweek, I miss you.
Or daily calls, heaven forbid.
Yeah.
I hate calls between the houses.
I do too.
Anybody that has done my coaching knows that I hate those. And people don't always understand in the beginning. They think, what? How can I be away from my kid for 5 days and not talk to him? And it's like, because it's better for your kid.
Right.
You might not feel good about it. It might be hard for you, but it's better for your kid. Because how is your kid going to sit in the other parent's house and have any sort of comfortable conversation with you? No. Even if you have a lot of cooperation, I think your children would have a hard time with that. If they were on the phone with their mother and we're sitting right in the room, and we have no issue with their mom at this point, I think that they would feel the need to like go to their room or have a private conversation or whatever.
Right. So, yeah, it's better to, here's a thought. Say something supportive about the other world.
Right.
Tell them, look, it's transition day, and I know your dad's going to have a lot of really cool stuff for you to do, and we'll see you when you get back.
Right. I can remember you having conversations like that with your kids and saying, you go, mom hasn't seen you in several days. I'm sure she's missed you. You're gonna have a good time, and when you come back, we're gonna go down to the beach next weekend and do A, B, C, and D. So that tells them you're anticipating the joy of seeing them again,
right.
But you're not doing this thing like we talked about that in Enmeshed Mother, who would just cry and sob at the transitions and make the children feel, and they would literally run from their dad.
Yeah.
Because they felt so horrible, they just couldn't leave her.
Right.
And, kudos to him, he understood.
Right.
He understood that was the children's issue and that it wasn't really about him.
Yes. And if you haven't had those children yet, be careful who you have them with.
I don't know why you'd be listening to the podcast if you haven't had those children yet.
I know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But, oh, Lord, sometimes we wish we had chosen
my thought with her was always, oh, those poor kids.
Yeah. It's a lot of stress.
And she thought she was a great mom because she was so attentive, like overly so.
Yeah.
And that really is not resilience. I'm a huge believer in free range kids. You don't, and not everybody agrees with that. I understand that.
But the courts do have concern about somebody parentifying their children. And that's what that is. When the children feel they have to be with you to take care of you, that's parentifying them.
That's a problem. It
right.
definitely is.
And I think the court sees that.
Right. And it's too much for their developmental, their stage of life. That's too much to put on them.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you have, well, it's too much at any stage of life, but I think teenagers bear up under it a little better because they're hitting the stage where they're worried about themselves, not you. So it's usually not quite as hard on them because they're a little more naturally selfish at that stage of life. But I think for little children, especially, like I said, that 8, 9, 10 age, where they start being aware that that other person is having pain around them being gone.
Yeah.
I think that starts to become very burdensome for particularly that age of child.
Right. So, yeah, what do you do? I think the call to action is you do what you need to do, especially in the time when they're at the other parent's house, to be a whole person. You got your spiritual life, you got your friendships that are with your peers, with adults. Some of you may have a new mate, and they'll probably want some attention. And you've got your hobbies and your avocations, and you have your spiritual life and your walk with God.
And your career.
And your career. Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. With all these things in, it's like, who has time left for a career if we're doing all that?
Yeah, that's why I never get any work done.
Or if if you don't have a career, then this is probably a time that you've got to start figuring that out. So,
right.
Either way, you need to devote attention to that.
But the thing is, don't make the kids be your caretaker.
Right.
Don't make them the source of your happiness.
Right.
They can't. I mean, children make me happy. There's no question about it. But it's not like I depend on them for my happiness.
Right.
That's where you go off the rails.
Right. I mean, I think we all get joy from our children. But,
right. I get joy from all my family relationships.
Right.
I have a lot of joy around my relationship to my 82-year-old mom.
Who I spoke to today, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes she calls me and not
She's so cute. She's just a cute little old lady now.
She is. The building she lives in just got purchased by someone, and they had to tent it for fumigation or whatever. And she has a little patio that she has a little garden on. And she was devastated because the fumigation killed all of her plants.
Oh.
And her house plants. She said, one of my house plants I'd had in there for 13 years and it died. And I felt like saying, she had to vacate the house for like a week. And I felt like saying, well,
don't make your plants the source of your happiness.
Well, why didn't you take your plant with you?
Yeah.
When you left, why wouldn't you? I would think that would have been one of the instructions.
Well, she didn't know.
Well, but shouldn't they tell her that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Should.
Anyway,
they
we
might
digress.
have told her that, and then she might have forgotten.
But she forgot because she's 82, yeah. Or your sister or somebody I thought would have remembered. But anywho,
yeah.
So she's busy trying to renew her plant life is her current state. So that's the update on Mom if you're interested for this week. Okay, so if you are listening to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, don't forget to rate and review us and also subscribe so you get notified as new episodes come out each week. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel so that you, again, get notified as new videos come out each week. And we will see you next time.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.